The drama surrounding the WBO Super Middleweight Championship fight between Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez and Jesse Hart was never simply about two undefeated fighters colliding under the hot Arizona sky. It was about legacy, survival, bloodlines, and the kind of heart that either breaks under pressure or becomes something altogether different, something forged, something permanent. Tucson was the stage, and what unfolded over 12 blistering rounds was the sort of fight that reminds boxing fans why they fell in love with the sport in the first place. From the opening bell, there was a physical story being told before a single punch landed cleanly. Jesse Hart, standing at 6'3", carried with him the towering frame and the heavyweight bloodline of his father, Cyclone Hart, one of Philadelphia's most celebrated middleweights of the 1970s, a man so good that in any other era he would have been a multi-belt world champion. Jesse had been born for this, raised for this, dragged out of bed at 5 in the morning as a 6-year-old to run roads with his father before the rest of the world had opened its eyes. This fight wasn't just a title shot, it was a pilgrimage. But across the ring stood Gilberto Ramirez, the champion, a man who had risen to 35-0, carrying with him the hunger of the streets, a guy who once said with a smile after the weigh-in, "Life is good. I used to fight in the streets, now they pay me to be a champ." That grin masked something dangerous. It masked a fighter who was technically superior, more disciplined, more experienced, and entirely comfortable in his own skin when the lights came on brightest. The early rounds belonged to Hart in spirit, if not entirely on the cards. He moved, well, circling with his long frame, using his angles to keep Ramirez from settling into a rhythm. The commentary team noted with some concern that Hart, despite his size, often struggled to use his height the way a 6'3" man ought to. The question they kept returning to was not whether Hart could move, he clearly could, but whether movement alone would be enough to win a championship fight. You can survive on legs all night long, but survival and victory are two different addresses. Hart was trying to find the right one. He was speaking a language the judges would eventually need to hear, but he was still learning the vocabulary of championship boxing at the highest level, and Ramirez was a veteran teacher with bad intentions. Then came the second round and everything changed. In what would become the defining sequence of the entire fight, Ramirez loaded up with a right hand to the head that pushed Hart forward, and then, with the precision of a man who had rehearsed this exact moment in his mind 1,000 times, landed a devastating left uppercut straight up the middle. Hart leaned right into it. His legs went immediately. The crowd in Tucson erupted as the referee stepped in to administer the mandatory count, and Hart, the pride of Philadelphia, stood there on spaghetti legs, his balance deserting him, his body betraying everything his mind was screaming at it. What followed was one of the most dramatic survival sequences of the entire fight. Hart, to his enormous credit, did not go down again. He held when he had to, moved when he could, and rode out the round on instinct and pure Philly stubbornness. It was the kind of thing his father would have recognized immediately. Not technique, but temperament. Not training, but character. The fourth round piled more suffering onto Hart's account. Ramirez had clearly identified the body as the way to dismantle the taller man. When you're trying to survive, your legs move, your head moves, but the body stays put, and Ramirez exploited that ruthlessly. He attacked the midsection with methodical, punishing consistency, taking the air out of Hart's lungs one punch at a time. The bodywork was setting everything else up. Each shot downstairs made Hart's defenses upstairs incrementally weaker, and when Ramirez shifted his attention back upward, he found Hart less and less able to respond. The champion was not just winning rounds, he was dismantling a man architecturally, floor by floor, reducing the structure from the foundation. By the end of the fourth, Hart had been hurt badly again, and CompuBox told the cold statistical truth. Ramirez had landed 40 power punches in that round alone, while Hart's connect numbers had been sitting in single digits for several rounds. Running. Between rounds, the corner work became as compelling as the boxing itself. In Hart's corner, trainer and father Cyclone could be heard urging his son to tie Ramirez up when hurt, to buy time, to use his experience of Philadelphia wars to get himself through these storms. In Ramirez's corner, the instructions were surgical and confident. Work the body, stalk him intelligently, use your waist, use feints, and when the time is right, finish it. The champions team believed they were close to a stoppage. They may have been right, But Hart kept denying them that satisfaction, kept reaching somewhere deep and coming back for more, refusing to let his legs become a full confession of how much damage he had absorbed. The middle rounds carried a strange, shifting energy. Ramirez was dominant in the aggregate, but Hart was finding moments, landing that right uppercut with increasing confidence, occasionally snapping Ramirez's head back and reminding everyone in the building that a man who carries big punching, power in his hands is never truly out of a fight regardless of the scorecards. The commentary team pointed out something important about Hart's right uppercut. He dropped it too low before throwing it, broadcasting the shot, giving a disciplined opponent the window to fill that gap with a straight left before it arrived. Hart was getting there with the punch, but he was leaving himself open to the counter, and against Ramirez, open invitations tended to get accepted. The strategic message from ringside was clear. Hart needed to stop landing one big shot and start landing two. The right uppercut followed by the left hook. One shot was entertainment. Two shots was danger. As the fight moved past the midpoint, something interesting began to happen. Hart, who had been absorbing punishment and merely surviving for stretches, began to dig deeper. He found a second wind that nobody, perhaps not even he, had fully expected. His confidence began to rebuild, and with it came a willingness to stand and exchange, to stop running the perimeter and start pressing his own agenda. He was behind on the cards, significantly so by most estimates, with Ramirez clearly ahead. But Hart was not ready to write a concession speech. The Philly in him simply would not allow it. Round after round, he answered the bell, and round after round, he found something to give, even when the logical analysis suggested the tank should have been empty long ago. The 11th round delivered, the most breathtaking moment of the entire second half of the fight. Hart uncorked a right hand that snapped Ramirez's head back sharply enough to make the champion's legs respond involuntarily. A small, chaotic shuffle, a tiny but unmistakable signal that the punch had landed somewhere important. The corner saw it. The crowd saw it. The commentators saw it and immediately asked the question that defined the final chapters of this fight. Did Hart see it? Because if he saw it, he had to go. Champions are made in exactly those moments. You feel the other man waver. You feel the math of the fight shift for just a second in your favor. And the choice you make in that heartbeat says more about who you are than anything else in boxing. Hart moved, but he didn't fully commit. He didn't pour himself through the opening with the kind of controlled ferocity that might have changed the ending. Whether it was fatigue, caution, or simply the fraction of a second between seeing something and believing it, the moment passed. Ramirez gathered himself, reclaimed the ring, and walked into the final round still wearing the belt. The 12th and final round was the kind of closing chapter that championship fights are supposed to produce. Both men came out with everything. They had left, which in Hart's case was considerable given everything he had been through, and in Ramirez's case was a demonstration of the championship mentality he had spoken about in the days leading up to the fight. He had said he felt even hungrier as a champion than he had as a challenger. You could see it in those closing minutes, the way he kept pressing forward, kept throwing, kept demanding more from himself even as his opponent was fighting with the desperation of a man who knew the scorecards were not in his favor. The crowd in Tucson rose to its feet as the two men traded shots down the final stretch. And when the final bell rang, there was a moment of shared silence in the arena that only boxing can produce. The silence that follows extraordinary effort. The quiet recognition that something real had just been witnessed. The scorecards told the story that the rounds had been building toward all night. Judges Carter and Flores both returned identical tallies of 115 to 112, with Judge Feldman scoring it 114 to 113. By unanimous decision, Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez remained the WBO Super